Herkese merhaba, yayınımıza hoş geldiniz. Bugün konumuz son dönemin en ilgi çekici gündemlerinden olan Espor ve Espor'un hukuki yönü. Bugün yanımda Neziroglu Hukuk Bürosu'nun kurucu ortaklarından Yiğit Bey var. Yiğit Yıldız, hoş geldiniz
Merhaba.
Yiğit Bey. Biz Yiğit Bey'le hukukçu kimliğimizle beraber konunun hukuki yönünü ele alacağız. Ama daha da önemlisi, bugün yanımızda profesyonel bir e-spor oyuncumuz var. Hem müvekkilimiz hem de çok yakın dostumuz olan G2 ve Mad Lions takımlarının eski oyuncusu, aynı zamanda Dünya Şampiyonası'nda Los Angeles'ta $1 milyon için yarışmış olan ve ülkesini İspanya'yı temsil etmiş olan Juan Carlos Gutierrez yanımızda. Hoş geldin. Welcome, Carlos.
Thank you for inviting me here to Istanbul.
Of course. We're so happy to have you here today in Istanbul and in our live session. Thank you for joining us. Bugün yayının bir kısmını Türkçe, bir kısmını da Carlos'la konuşacağımız için daha rahat olması açısından İngilizce devam edeceğiz. Yiğit Bey'le sözleşmeleri, hukuki yönden sözleşmelerde olması gerekenleri, oyuncuyla kulüp arasındaki sözleşmeyi, markalarla kulüp ve markalarla oyuncu arasındaki sözleşmeleri, olmazsa olmaz kısımlarını, e-spordan gelir elde etmeyi ve bu elde edilen gelirin vergilendirilmesi konusunu görüşeceğiz. Carlos'la da e-spor nedir, bir oyuncu olarak bize kendi tecrübesinden, bilgilerinden neler paylaşabilir, bunları görüşeceğiz. So Carlos, welcome again. And as you know, in the past decade, I may say, the technological advances have introduced a new way of playing, watching, regulating sports and sports performances. So, as a player, would you be able to define esports for us? What is esports? Is it professional video game playing?
Well, actually, it's a tricky question because esport is so huge that it's quite difficult to define it. But I will try my best to do it. So, esport actually, they are competitions of video games, but there is a lot beyond that. So, when I talk about a lot, it's a lot. Brands or esport organization, viewers, million people watching other players, psychologists, people that take care of your performance, mental health. Actually, it's really huge. So, esports is not just competitions or video games.
I see. And how do we assess whether a game is esports or not? How do you define it? Can you give us examples, for example?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so this is a bit difficult to assess because it requires time, and you need to analyze the type of game, if it is suitable to become a big thing and to turn it into a competition, a game that you can play, that viewers like. So we got several games that they are actually considered as esports, so such as League of Legends, Call of Duty, CSGO, a lot of games. So we got like 5-7 games that they are always there. They've been there for quite many years. But then, little by little, you could see other titles that they are getting a position into this competition. So it's a bit difficult because I would say like they are considered as esport and as a game that they got the audience when they reach a considerable amount of viewership. Until then, you are just seeing it, how it's evolving, how much traffic of people you got there.
I see. So I know there's a lot of skepticism going on around this, but is esports considered a real, legitimate type of sport? What can you say about this?
Well, depending on which country you are asking me this question. So if we are talking in United States, it would be considered as an sport, or in other countries. So also in Asia, it's well regarded being an esport player or esports in general. But in other countries, it's a bit more difficult because you could be facing some legal barriers, and it's a little bit more difficult to change that term to a real sport.
So I guess it depends on how much this industry has developed in that given country or nation.
Exactly, depending on how open the country also is to this new environment and this new industry.
I see. And how do players prepare for these performances? What do you do before, during the game? Can you give us some examples? Like, how is it similar, for example, to a real life sports event, the preparation period?
Okay, so depending who you look at, it changes, it varies. So, for example, in my case, I used to do the normal things like take breakfast before the competition. We normally travel like 1-2 days before, and we just gather together with your teammates, and you just try to let something off, not to think about esports or strategies. You know, for example, is what it worked for me. But I know from other players that they really like to continue to check the strategies in order to not to forget any important details when it comes to the game, the real game. So it really varies.
I see. And during the game, what type of effort does it require? How much strategic planning, for example, goes into it? Is it like chess? Like some say it's like the chess of the 21st century. Do you agree? How much strategic planning goes into it?
Absolutely. I think there is a lot of work behind it. So depending on the game and the team that you are looking at, I feel like they prepare it in a different way, but they all have the same strategy. That is, you need to prepare on one hand the strategy part, how the team is gonna collaborate together within the game, and then on the other hand, you need to look into more the skills, the aim, how is your performance within the game. So I would say like it's completely different from team to team, but the preparation here is essential, and we spend a lot of hours working with coaches that they study our performance, our statistics within the game in order to maximize our performance.
I see. And how would you say it's similar to a real life football game, and how is it different, for example?
Well, it's different in the way that you don't have to do any kind of physical effort. Well, just with your hands. Actually, we're seeing some troubles that some players are experiencing with their hands, but it's not a big deal. But on the other hand, when it comes to mental health and this kind of stuff, I think it's more a subject to study, because you need to be all the time for a large amount of hours focused on the game. It requires you a lot of concentration. So I think this part is something that we need to look deeper, because many players are suffering of depression, mental issues. So I think like more support from psychologists or people who can't help them out, it would be really, really nice and necessary.
Yeah.
By the way, I remember Real Madrid, which is the Spanish team, football club, is built a new stadium, and that new stadium is built also part of the stadium for the Esport players. Even the Başakşehir, which is the Turkish football team, has a area for the esports player and viewers. Day by day, this situation, this topic is growing up. What do you think about that?
Well, actually, it's not the only case of these clubs. Also, other clubs in Spain or in Europe, they are trying to get themselves into esports in some way or another. For example, Mad Lions part of Operative Media. They are at the moment building a whole stadium for esports, because in America it's bigger, it's a little bit more developed than in Europe. So I think this is going to be even bigger and bigger, and little by little these football teams or NBA teams, they are getting into esport in some way or another.
Yeah, that's great. And even in Turkey now, there is so many other developments, like universities, colleges, and other football teams are now having their esports teams established, which is exciting. Like, it's very up and coming in Turkey too. But my other question is, for a game to be classified as esports, does it have to be selected by an official and international tournament? Is that how it works?
Well, this is a question that you need to look at the country regulations, because it really varies from country to country. For example, in Europe, depending where you are, maybe you have to meet the requirements of the country. But in general, when it comes to getting a spot into the league, like league or other leagues, other country national leagues, you just have to meet the requirements of the league. Like, you have to meet some size requirements, you have to have a profitable business model. It needs to represent, you need to show like your business model, and your company, your esport club is gonna stay there for quite long. So it's not just 1 year and then you just disappear. So this kind of requirements from the league is the requirements that you have to meet normally.
I see.
If we don't look at the country.
Yeah, makes sense. And how do you think Europe in general has approached this industry? You're from Spain, so you can speak in terms of the specific country or in Europe in general. How has it developed, and what can you say about the general approach to the industry in Europe?
Well, it's a really interesting question, because actually America and Europe, they are a little bit different to each other, but I think like they are different in terms of investment, because in Europe, unfortunately, we have some kind of investment and really good products, really good companies that we are competing against American esport club, and it's really tight, this kind of competition, despite the differences in investment. So I think this is the biggest difference.
I see. And do you have anything to say on this, Turkey? Turkey's approach has developed much less compared to Europe, but we have some exciting news.
For 2 days, we need the time, because 2 days, even the sport clubs, Turkish Beşiktaş or Galatasaray, also don't know how improve esports departments. But knowledge is growing today, especially Europe and United States players and clubs. Every day by day, write in articles, made the tournaments, and we are very lucky because we established a federation, Esport Federation. I believe the Esport Federation gonna make good tournaments, good organizations, but this is not easy. It's not easy because it's a new world. Virtual life, we must working about that topics, on that topics, we're gonna see.
Yeah, exactly. And before we move on to part 2, which is going to be more in detail about the player, my question is, do you think COVID in the past year has some way helped the popularity of esports in general, because people are confined to home for the large part of their social lives?
Absolutely. I feel like esport industry has really benefited from the pandemic. I would like to say this, but it's a reality because it's what it is. But yeah, I think that the impact the pandemic has had in the esport industry has been huge,
Yeah.
because while every industry was completely paralyzed, esport was still running. So as if nothing would have happened. So I think this has been really beneficial for us, for the industry in general, because more and more companies from the outside, not really like gaming companies, but companies such as banking companies or other kind of companies that has little to do with esport, has they have started to look at esport like, okay, so was about if this happen again, how are we promote ourselves, how are we going to, so this is the big thing.
I see. Okay, we can continue in part 2 about the player stuff.
Okay.